Becky, welcome to the podcast. You know, I've wanted you on for the longest time, and now I've got you. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, first and foremost, you are the queen, I feel like, of summits. So why are they so effective in terms of list building for us as course creators?
Well, when you think about building your list, ideally you want to be bringing in a lot of people. And there are lots of different ways that you can do this, but many of them take a long time. So if you think about posting on social media, that's going to be a long-term strategy before you start to see real growth. If you think about guesting on other people's podcasts, which I do recommend, that also takes a long time. You have to find the podcasts and you have to wait till you get interviewed and you have to wait for the episode to come out. And so again, it kind of trickles out. And if you go the ads route, that could bring in people quickly, but it's also kind of a gamble. And
Yep.
a lot of us, when we're first starting out, we don't have a ton of money to be investing, and ads might not be the route we want to go. So what I love about summits is it's a way for you to bring in a lot of people in a pretty short amount of time, and you're really partnering with other people. So I think there are other benefits to it beyond list building. And it can also open up other opportunities for you to become an expert or be seen as an expert by others and be invited into other opportunities as well.
Okay, so many great reasons. I love that. In an episode or before this one, I was talking in terms of the layers of audiences, you know, because Becky, you were my go-to person in terms of checking out my script. So awesome to look at my podcast. But tell me about your journey with summits, because I feel like you've been doing them, well, at least as long as I've known you. So how did you get started with them?
Yeah, so I started out, I did my first summit. It feels kind of embarrassing because the technology has changed so much. Um, Back in 2011.
Wow.
So when I started out in the online space, I was a teacher, then I had kids, I wanted to be home with them. I decided to become a coach. I did the whole certification, I had the website built, and then I realized I knew nothing about building a business. And people in my everyday life, I'm in the Midwest, had no idea what I was doing. I think they thought I was having some sort of early crisis in my life. And then in the online space, it just felt overwhelming. So I actually started by trying to learn from other people. And at the time, a lot of people were hosting summits, and that's how you could learn about different aspects of having an online business. And I realized, okay, building a list is important. And these other people are doing it through summits. So organization has been one of my skills. And I was like, I think I can figure this out. And so that's what I did is I thought, okay, I'm going to choose a topic. I'm going to find speakers who I think can teach about different aspects. I'm going to invite them to join me and then host it. And so we did. I mean, back then it was like get a conference call number and people would actually call on their phones. I feel really old, but but that's how it started. And I did. I quickly built a list, went from nothing to over 1,000 people on my list. My problem, which I think we'll talk about later, was that I didn't have an offer at the time.
Yeah.
All these people, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do with them now. But I learned a lot along the way. And so now when I talk with people on summits, we do have more of a game plan in mind. But I have found it just to be a really effective way of building a list quickly and bringing in a lot of people who are interested in the work that you do.
How did you get that courage early on to ask people to be a part of your summit?
I was thinking about that a bit. And I think part of it was just um, maybe being a little young and naive and just thinking like, oh, everyone wants to help everyone else out. And so that's kind of how I viewed it, was like it was a win for everyone involved because they were going to get to be in front of new people and they were going to be able to make new connections. And so I just approached it like that. And for the most part, people were very kind. I did have a couple of rough experiences where, I don't come from the corporate background at all. And so I think sometimes when I interact with people who do have that, plus I think coming from the Midwest too, sometimes different personalities can come across as more rough. Um, and so I had to work to, let things go that way. But I think for the most part, it was just coming at it as like, let's make this a win for everyone. And also just being a little naive.
Well, and I think you're there to add value, right? You're there to offer them something that can help them. I think like that's one of your core philosophies, is it not? Like, how can I feel like every relationship, you're like, how can I add value to this person?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think every time I've done an event like this, it's been how can this be a win for everyone? How can this be beneficial to everyone who's involved? So, yes, I think coming at it with that in mind also helps.
Okay, that's great. Now, I know there's not enough time during this podcast to walk through like, hey, can we just walk through the phases of planning out an entire summit? But just wanted to walk through some core principles that you think are the most important when building out your own summit, whether it's the first time or it's the next time that you're doing this. Like, can you give us a couple of details of what you always like to double down on or focus on?
Yes. Okay. So, learning from my mistakes, the very first thing is to be really clear on your intentions. So, yes, you want to bring people into your audience, but why do you want to bring people into your audience? So, ideally, you have a course that maybe is ready to sell or you're working on behind the scenes. So, I would start with that in mind and be thinking about, okay, who is a good fit for this course? Where are they now? And what information in a summit could help them, like people who are interested in this summit will then be interested in my course. So you want something that ties in closely to the course, but that doesn't really overlap too much because you want them to want that next step with the course. So once you have that in mind, then I would think through more of the details as far as what topics do you want to cover? What types of speakers do you want to have? And then maybe think about the format of your summit too. So some people like to do video, some people like to do audio, some people like to do it live, some people like to pre-record. So I would think through more what works for you and get clear on kind of your vision for the summit. And from there, once you have those details, it's then time to find speakers. So you can do this a couple different ways. I've done it both ways, where sometimes you're seeking speakers and you send out invitations to them. With those invitations, I would include the details because people are busy. They need to know what's going to be expected of them, also what is in it for them. And then the other way that you could do it is you could create an application form for speakers. And there are a number of different places online where people are looking for speaking opportunities. So you could post it and have people apply that way. So, the one way is if you're inviting speakers, that requires more time and energy
Mhm.
upfront. But on the other hand, if you just have a form, you don't quite know what you're getting. So it'll require a little bit more time on the back end as far as going over applications and selecting people from there. Uh,
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, that's okay. So, yeah. So after you've done that, once you have people who have applied or you have selected speakers, then you need to go through the process of either pre-recording interviews or getting things set up so you can go live. You also, what I like to recommend is doing marketing materials for your speakers. So that way it's very easy for them to help promote. And they can always adapt the, the copy and all of that. But if you give them materials, it just makes it easier to help spread the word for the event.
Okay, yes, let's unpack this a little bit. This is so great. So you could tell you're a pro at this because you could just rattle off the steps in your head. Finding the speakers or finding the audience that really works for you, right? And you said this up front about a good fit for what's the step before my course. So how do you do that research where, say I'm proactively going after speakers that I know might have a great audience for my course? Like, what are your tips for us for that? Like, is there any words of wisdom in terms of finding the right audience?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is to give yourself time. I think a lot of us, we have ideas and we want to act on them right away. And that can put a lot of unnecessary pressure. So when you're clear on your audience and you have ideas about what topics they would be interested in, I would start looking for people who are experts on that topic. And then I would start looking at their audience and seeing does their audience overlap with yours. So, for example, if you want to work with service-based businesses and they only work with product-based businesses, their people are not your people. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I would take a little time to look at that, and you could look at their social media and kind of see who's engaging with them and what are they putting out there. You could also join their email list and see what are they sending out to people. Does that resonate with you? Another great way to connect with people is just through your network. So it might be that your connections aren't ideal speakers, but they probably know people. So if you tell people, hey, I have this idea for the summit, here's who I'm looking for. do you know anyone who might be a great fit? A lot of the time you'll get recommendations that way as well.
Okay, I love this. And at the beginning of this episode, I talked about how you connected me with some summits. And one of them, she reached out to me because I was the course creation spot, right? So she had an SEO spot, she had a legal spot, and then et cetera. I think like an IG person. So I thought that was smart how she had categories that then like fed into her kind of outcome. Like, do you love that idea?
Do. Yes, as you were saying that, I was like, yes, that's something I want to make sure to cover is that I think it's really important that each speaker can be seen as an expert
Mhm.
contributing to the whole event. So that way they're not competing against one another, but they're bringing in kind of different pieces to the puzzle. So that way everyone can really shine in their expertise. And I think it helps the speakers because everyone gets the spotlight and there's not
Mhm.
competition. But it also helps your attendees because they're learning about different topics that can help them in their growth. And it's not going to be hearing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I just thought that was so smart. Okay, let's dig into some mistakes. So I know you mentioned offer. So can we go back to that dark period of your past? So you do all this work for a summit, and then what happened when, in terms of you didn't have an offer? Like when did you make that aha? Like take us back.
Yeah. So I think for me, I realized that, I mean, I've been a teacher. I didn't have any experience in sales at all. And so I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was with selling anything. And so it was easy to put together a summit because I'm giving
Mhm.
away things for free.
Right.
But then afterwards, it was like, and during the summit, you're able to email them consistently because you're telling them about different speakers, different topics, reminding them to listen to different things or watch different things. And that's easy. But then afterwards, I was stuck with what am I going to write to them about? Like, I have this email list. What am I going to share with them? So I definitely recommend that you have an offer and you have a plan before you leap into all of this. Um, I will say, like, looking back, way back, it was just kind of an experiment for me as far as
Mhm.
what worked, what didn't work. And I do like to say that now, looking back, I've learned a lot and it can help other people along the way.
So I'm pretty adamant, and you know this, you know my philosophy, so that if we're gonna put in the work, let's make an offer, even if it's a low price point offer. I do understand also your outcome was list building. You got your outcome. Uh, but do you not recommend that if you're gonna put in the effort into a summit that you have something to sell at the end of it?
I think you should. So
Okay.
I know that it used to be a thing, it might still be in some places,
Yeah.
that you could do a summit for free or you could do a VIP upgrade.
Sure.
I personally have found that that's not really worth the effort because a lot
Yeah.
of times what they're doing with that is you're making content only available for a limited period of time for those who are free, and then you have to take it down, and that just requires extra work on your
Mm-hmm.
plus I view it as the whole idea with the summit is we want people to listen to the interviews, to the different sessions, and if we're giving them very limited window, that makes it harder, and so I don't think it's as valuable for the attendees or for the speakers, and I also just from being behind the scenes of a number of summits, the sales don't seem to make up for the amount of work put into it. So what I do recommend is instead of selling a VIP
A
upgrade
VIP. Yeah.
itself, is that you have an offer afterwards.
Okay.
So something I've been doing with clients lately is we have like a week-long summit where they're bringing in
Mm-hmm.
speakers. And then the next week we do, I wouldn't call it quite a launch, but it's more, maybe they'll have a workshop or they'll have a challenge where the host of the summit is now sharing up more of their expertise in one session or a few sessions that are live. And then that leads into sales for their program from there. So instead of just selling the summit itself, it is leading into one of their offers.
Okay, I love that. I do. I really like that that kind of flow, and I agree that it's something into a webinar or workshop or a challenge. What about a paid summit? How do you feel about free versus paid?
I think it depends on your goals. So well, I have lots of thoughts on this now.
Go, hit it.
So on the one hand, I do think there is an issue where you can get a lot of people on your list for free but they're never going to buy from you.
Okay.
So I think it depends on your business goals. Are you going to have, a course that you're uh, offering regularly and you need a really large audience for that? Or maybe you have more of a high ticket offer and you don't need as many people for that. So I think if numbers are your real goal, free makes sense. And that could work for, if you're selling into a lower priced membership, something like that would be easier to convert. On the other hand, if you have a real high ticket offer and you're going to have a more targeted audience with that. And some of those people, they're going to value things more if they have to pay for them than if it's, I know also like depending on who you work with, I know as I've gotten further along in my business, I don't have time for a lot of free things.
Yeah.
But if I invest in a program, then I'll make time for that. So I think part of that comes down to knowing your audience. So if you have those people that are going to value it more if they pay for it, then I think paid makes sense. I would just go into it with the idea that this isn't necessarily about making money from this
Right.
event, but that it's about getting the right people.
And what have you been doing with your clients and with yourself lately? Has it been more free or more paid?
It has been more free, but then leading into a paid offer. And so we do kind of what I talked about with that. The summit itself is free, and then there is, a more intensive workshop or webinar, and then into a paid offer.
Okay. Okay, I love that. All right, thanks for giving us both sides. That's really helpful. I want to go back to when you broke down the different components. So, what if I'm keen on doing a summit, but topic, maybe I'm hung up a little bit on that. What do you recommend I do? Get in touch with my audience? Like what are some tips that you have in terms of I do want to hold one, but I just don't know what I want it to be about quite yet.
That's a really good question. So if you are currently working with clients,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of people where maybe you've been doing one-on-one work, you're creating a course, your
Yep.
course is going to be similar to the work you've done with clients.
Yes.
Maybe thinking back to your clients and where they were before they worked with you, and what were some of the topics that they were struggling with? What were the reasons they came to work with you in the first place?
Ooh, that's good. I love that.
Or some that you might go back to clients and ask, hey, what were you struggling with? What made you decide to work with me? You could also do surveys with your audience. I would just make sure when you're asking questions, it is to your ideal clients.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people where they're posting, surveys in Facebook groups that are a bunch of other business owners or a bunch of other course creators. And those people aren't necessarily your audience. So their answers may or may not be on target. So I think asking either if you have an email list, asking them or asking your clients would be the best bet.
I love this idea. I was just talking to another client about the Ryan Levesque questions, right? Like what did you want or what do you think you're missing out on? What's the fear? I'm butchering them a little bit, but the idea of going back to clients that have seen the results, right? And asking them to think back, I think is really smart. And in terms of what did they really want and then how you can solve for that. I love that. So smart. So smart, Becky. I gotta ask you, you're like the ultimate introvert in my eyes, and I say that because I'm a raging extrovert, and you know that. And it's wonderful that we can get along. So, how do you do it? How do you do the summits? How do you put yourself out there? How are you on this podcast right now? Like as because I know it must be a thing, right? As an introvert.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say today it was about challenging myself to do something outside my comfort zone. But the big thing for me is to get out of my head because if I focus on myself and how nervous I am, then it's very easy to just shut down and not do any of this. But if I focus on could someone out there benefit from this, and if I focus on helping that other person, even if it's one person, that gets me out of my own way and helps me to get out there. As far as the summits, what I have learned really is kind of guarding my time. And so I learned, for me, doing things live, I did do the first ones were live.
Yeah.
Um, had kind of a horror situation where speaker didn't show up on time. And I had, it
Were
was
you
still,
live already? And they didn't show.
You weren't there. I was like, what am I going to do?
What did you do?
I babbled a lot,
Yeah.
probably,
Okay.
just talking, kind of filling in, and then she did show up. She was like 10 minutes late.
Ooh.
So from there, I was like, I'm never doing it live again because I don't want that stress. I don't do well with that stress. So part of it is just knowing yourself. Um, and so pre-recording helps me because that way I know if disaster strikes, we're okay. And I can feel confident that what we're putting out there is something that I feel good about. And then also with that, like when I set up my calendar to pre-record, I limit it to certain days when I'm doing it because
Mm-hmm.
I'm on calls every single day of the week. That's
Yep.
draining for me. But if I can limit it to a couple of days, that's easier for me. So I would just say being aware of yourself and what works for you and allowing yourself to build it out in a way that works for you. So that way you're not overextending yourself.
Okay, I love that. And then I want to go back because you mentioned this pre-recording versus video, audio versus video. I know we were getting kind of burnt out on video, right? It's like going live on video with summits, and then you sent me some just audio only summits. Like, is that still hot, or is that kind of cooled off a little bit?
What I'm seeing, the audio is still working really well.
Okay.
The platform Hello Audio works really well for private. You can set it up like a private podcast, basically. And you can have it set so people could either listen just to individual sessions, or you could have it like a private podcast where they can just go from one to another on there. And what I like about that is, I can listen to a podcast if I'm going for a walk, or if I'm running errands, or if I'm, folding laundry. Um, Whereas sitting down and making time for a video, I have a harder time doing that.
Yeah, me too.
Part of it that just depends on knowing your audience and what will they make time for. Because again, your goal is for them to actually listen to it, learn from it, implement it. And so I would choose whatever format you think is going to encourage that.
And I feel like maybe a little bit more apt to go back and listen if it's audio, if it just feels a little easier. Or I'm more, I guess, apt to listen
Yeah.
versus getting to watch a video, sitting down and watching a video.
Yes. And another idea that comes to mind with that is thinking about the length of your sessions as well as how many speakers you're going to have. Because I know, again, this was many, many years ago. People used to have, 40, 50 speakers on
Yeah.
these. And they would be like 45 minutes to an hour. And no one, I don't think anyone has time to listen to all of that.
No.
And so again, when you think about being of value both to your speakers and your attendees, I think the shorter sessions are good and also not as many speakers.
Okay, I love that. The shorter sessions are a great idea. I mean, there's so much we could dive into, but tell me, what do you have going on? What's next? Where can people learn more about you?
Yes. So I feel like I'm always kind of evolving, but I've been, doing the operations for quite a while. So right now I do have several of these virtual events that we're working on. So we have a summit, and then later on this year we have a giveaway that we're doing. And I am working with some clients on these type of events as well. And so, Gina, I'll just give you a link in case people want to connect.
That'd be
Um,
great.
and I mean, I'm happy to work with people, but I'm also happy, like I'm always networking and sharing referrals to people. So welcome anyone to reach out if they need a recommendation or a referral. I have a great network of different operations people if you need people to help you with the tech aspect of any of this too.
That'd be awesome. And then something that promotes you to Becky, because you have to remind Becky to do that. And before I let you go, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being like the wind beneath my wings for the last few years. You put up with so much crud for me. You don't put up with crud, but you have helped me so much, and you were so generous and so loving and such a wonderful person. I am very lucky to have you in my life. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for you too.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.